Hey everyone, this is Carlo LaRossa with Secrets of Home Theater and Hi-Fi, and we are here in the MoFi room with Andrew Jones and a bunch of audiophile guinea pigs who are going to give me this video. So thanks in advance, guys, for sitting through this. I appreciate it. Oh, and you over there in the corner too. Thank you.
He has to hide his face because he's competition.
There we go. So Andrew, you were going to tell us what you have been working on in secrecy for this past little while.
2 years.
Oh my word.
And, well, 2 years in January since I left ELAC and moved to MoFi. And interesting opportunity because MoFi is not a speaker company. It's a company that wants to do speakers. And there's a very important difference there. So it was a very exciting opportunity, and especially basically being given a blank sheet of do something. And then you start to panic. Do what? You know, out of all the ideas I might have, what should I choose? And there was only very limited guidelines. One was we like big, impactful bass. And, you know, kind of who doesn't?
Right.
The other was what's in vogue right now is going back to big speakers. You know, mid-century modern revival of the JBLs and the KLHs and the Wharfedale Lintons, that kind of thing.
So that was a bit of a mission brief then, just those aspects.
Yes,
of it.
yeah, and that means big woofers, which is interesting because we've been building slimmer and slimmer speakers through the years, and where do you put the woofers? Especially the compact speaker. So you're putting smaller woofers, and I know I did it with the ELAC Debut 5 and like to show, oh, look what you can get from a small driver and box. But if you want big woofers, what's left? Put them on the side. And myself, I've not been a fan of that. I've tried to set up some speakers like that in a room, and it's a pain to get it right. So this idea of being able to go to a big woofer was, oh, that's different. No, I've done 10-inch woofers on the TAD speaker. That's the only time, other than subwoofers, but we're not talking subwoofers. So what would I do? And then the other aspect of what I normally would do is, of course, concentric drivers. And I've always said that if I'm doing a concentric driver system, I'm only going to do it as a three-way, because I don't want movement of the cone around the tweeter, because that causes modulation effects. And the one way of limiting that is to cross over to a dedicated woofer. And if you cross over around 200 hertz, you've just got almost no visible motion of the cone. So that really helps, but now you've complicated the system. You've got 3 drivers basically to design, and when you're crossing over that low passively to a woofer, and especially a vented system, you've got so much interaction between the crossover network and the impedance. You've got to put in conjugation, and components get big and heavy and costly. So there is a cost penalty to trying to do that. But the other way to minimize cone motion is make it big. You know, base level is area times excursion. So if you have more area, you got less excursion. Well, we've already said kind of we can have a 10-inch driver. So why not make it a 10-inch concentric? Then it doesn't have to be three-way. It can be simplified to be a two-way and become the thing that I told everyone in all the previous videos I would never do. So basically I lied to everybody. But heretic. My own heretic, my God. I set myself alight. So that one decision had a huge impact on what the development would be, because there isn't anything around that I can take parts and change around and even build a sample to test the idea. Because if you take what has been done in that way, you automatically think of tannoy dual concentrics.
Right.
Big woofers, but they don't have to operate as high because they typically use compression drivers working down lower in frequency. I wanted to use regular tweeters, so I can't really push things below 1.5, 1.6K, which means I want to defer the breakup modes to about, ideally much higher than 3K, but I would kind of accept 3K. But what kind of materials do I use for that? And the choice wasn't obvious. And I looked around, and you know, I've used exotic materials before, obviously beryllium, but no, I'm not going to develop a 10-inch beryllium bass mid-range unit. First of all, I can't, and secondly, couldn't afford to sell it.
And you don't want to deal with toxic materials.
That's not that's a separate discussion.
Okay.
It's kind of way overblown, that idea. But so I start looking around, and other than Tiny, what other examples are there of home audio speakers that operate to a woofer that high? Maybe DeVore Fidelity with their speakers. That's but otherwise it's Pro Audio. All these 10-inch mid-bass drivers from Pro Audio. So I start looking through the catalogues to see what the performance. And if I can find just one that meets my requirements, I know it's possible. Doesn't mean I know how to do it, but at least I've got something to aim for.
Right.
And I found one that just seemed to work quite nicely. It's just the shape of the cone and the voice coil diameter weren't what I was going to need. So I was going to have to, I can't just go out and buy that cone. So I'm going to have to tool it. But if I'm going to have to tool my own cone, I have to tool the spider for it. I have to tool the surround, the voice coil former, all the magnet system needed custom forged parts and tooled parts. So I've set on a path of, Dad, can I have some money for this? And can I have some money? Oh, and I also need to tool this. And you keep going on, not knowing whether it's going to work until I've got all these parts. And it takes a long time as well. So finally the parts start coming in, get assembled, measure the drivers, and it was working. Yeah. The cone had the right characteristic. There were some small issues I had to take care of. So I got the cabinet ready, and I put them all in, measured the whole system, developed a crossover. Now I have a chance to listen, and it's make or break time, right?
Absolutely.
And it had this characteristic, this liveness to it. Very much like TADs, but not at that price point. So I thought, this is working. So yeah, I tweaked around and fine-tuned it, and that's what this became. And interestingly, the magnet system is also rather special because you're trying to cram everything down the middle of the voice coil, and you end up often with concentric drivers of limited flux density in the gaps. And a lot of simple motor structures for drivers introduce distortion. Every driver has distortion. The implication is particularly important when you're doing a cone like this because, so say the first breakup mode is at 3K, and you think, well, if I have a 1.5K crossover, I'm an octave away. If I've got a high enough crossover slope, there's no signals getting to the driver to excite those resonances. But there are, because it's a non-linear system. Suppose I put a 1 kilohertz tone in. The third harmonic of 1 kilohertz is 3 kilohertz, right at the cone breakup. And it can't be filtered off by the crossover because that was before the non-linearity. So that's often what gives you hear the cone character, it's those distortions being amplified. So now I need a linear system. So by playing around with the magnets, putting them in reverse polarity, cramming them together, you have to magnetize before you assemble, and factories hate that. It's very difficult, but it enabled me to cancel some of the modulation effects of the voice coil inductance and modulation of the flux field, and they both drove each other's gap, and so I got to 1.4 Tesla in the tweeter and 1 Tesla in the woofer, everything that I needed, just a nightmare to assemble. But it's turned out to be, if you look at the voice coil inductance versus current or displacement, it's just a flat line, it's quite nice. But the cost of the driver, normally the most expensive part of the system is the cabinet. And especially when you're constructing like this with painted front baffles and veneers, 1-inch thick cabinet, all the side panels, top, bottom, sides, back, 1-inch thick, and the baffle is 2-inch thick. You would expect that to be the most expensive part of the assembly. It's not, it's the drive unit. So the other aspect of putting in that cabinet is you want to minimize diffraction at the edge of the cabinet. And one way of doing that, which I always used at TAD, was if you curve the cabinet backwards, the baffle backwards away from the edge of the driver, you minimise the diffraction, because now the diffraction edges are further back.
Gotcha.
The other way of doing it, and the KEF, the LS50, is exactly that formulation. When you, the alternative is a sort of piecewise approximation, faceting. And Avalon is a prime example of that.
Right.
But I kind of played around with shapes and settled on that shape. But this whole idea of mid-century modern, we can tie that in because all those speakers had a picture frame around the edge. So we added the picture frame around, but because it's set backwards, it has minimal effect upon the diffraction, as opposed to if it was a flat baffle and it was projecting forward. So you've got this nice mix between old and new. And if you want to, I mean, we've highlighted this so the faceting is obvious. In the home, it would be a gentler look. But if you want to tone it down even more, we have tooled a grille. And it's very open at the front. So it actually, it's about the first time I would choose to listen with grille on rather than not. But because it's cloth, it softens those edges. And when you put it on, it just gives it a more subdued but still interesting look. And of course, we're lighting this up, so it still looks more obvious than you would have at home. Unless you're in the habit of lighting up your speakers because you're so proud of the money you've spent on getting these speakers. But it results in big cabinets you can play around with, extra sensitivity or extra bass extension or a bit of both. You know, all my previous designs, because they've been compact speakers, have been about 85 dB sensitivity and 6 ohms or 4 ohms. This is 91 dB. And real, not one of these imagined. How did they think that was going to be 94 dB? So it's 91 dB and 8 ohms, and that means does not drop below 6.4.
Nice.
And most of the range it's above 8 to 10. And then a 6 dB point of 42 hertz.
Okay.
So you know, in room you'll get some reinforcement below that, but I don't quote what that might be just because. Who knows? It's not
a variable or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now you were saying it's a paper cone that you're using for the
yes
for the big mid.
Yeah.
And you went with a soft dome tweeter.
Soft dome tweeter.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
How does that sit in there? I mean, is it like it's not like acting like the dust cap. It's just like.
No, it's bound up to the magnet system, so it doesn't move.
Gotcha.
There was a question online: does the tweeter move with the cone? No. Certainly wouldn't be getting 91 dB sensitivity if I fastened the tweeter to the cone.
That would be painful.
I have pondered about could you do that? Could you do a multicellular electrostatic dome on the middle and it just all moves together? I just gave away my ideas. The other feature of it, especially with it being a two-way concentric, is orientation doesn't matter. Right? So it's politically correct. I shouldn't say that on video. And so you can put it on its side. Now, I started off when I was listening, because I only had 24-inch high stands at the time. So I put it on its side to lower it, because it's 4-inch difference in tweeter height, depending on whether you're laying it down. And I like the look of it on its side. Reminds me of the old Gale 401C.
Yeah, or classic monitoring setup.
Yeah, or Bose 301, that kind of style. But if you look carefully, the cabinet's straight, then it goes in at 3 degrees. And it's not for any acoustic or mechanical reason, it's just like a little visual detail. It's more obvious on the walnut speaker.
Right.
But what that allows us to do, with this customer stand with the 10-inch base, I've got a wooden block that we can screw on top. Raises it 2 inches, but it's got the angle on to cradle this speaker.
Oh.
So 2 of the missing 4 inches is from the height of the block.
Okay.
And then the cradling at the 3 degrees points it back to the same axis as it would have been if it was vertical.
Got it.
And that you can put that, instead of on the stand, you can put it on a desktop or not a bookshelf. Never fit this on a bookshelf. But say on top of a mixing desk, mixing console, or center channel. especially combined with the sensitivity, the ease of drive, the dynamics. It's perfect as a center channel.
3 of those would make a fantastic front, left, right, and center for a home theater.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now you just need to design an on-wall. Don't! No, sorry. Tell the camera person to shut up and you can just continue.
You just take the saw and you cut it down
There you
that
go.
joint, and there you go.
Sorry. I'm being silly.
Bit of
Don't mind.
DIY.
Yeah, that's right. Totally. Oh, man. So the official name of the speakers are...
SourcePoint 10.
SourcePoint.
And that was a nice little play on words because a concentric driver is a point source. But we also wanted to refer to the source of the music. So we switched that around and said SourcePoint, and then 10 refers to the size of the woofer.
Excellent. And the retail price on these is?
$36.99 a pair.
Very nice. Cool. Well, thank you, Andrew, so much for your time. This was fantastic, and thank you guys for putting up with me. I really appreciate it. And I'll let him go play music, which is what you guys want to hear. So thank you guys so much.
All right.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Andrew.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everyone.
it.